Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into a dramatic story where friendship, betrayal, and extraordinary determination collide to create an unforgettable journey. This is the story of a black man who once considered his best friend as family, only to be betrayed by him at the very moment he needed him most. From a heartbreak that could have destroyed his life, he turned pain into power, rose to become a powerful CEO, and built a billion-dollar empire that shocked the world. Across 8 chapters, each divided into 4 gripping parts, you'll discover raw details, unexpected twists, and deep lessons about trust, resilience, and ambition. If you've ever thought betrayal is the end, this story will make you think again. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any part of this captivating journey. Every moment will keep you curious, on edge, and finally, inspired beyond belief. Back then, he was just an ordinary black kid, born in a poor neighborhood where even the sunlight seemed slower, and dreams of success only existed on TV screens. His father left early, and his mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. He learned resilience from nights spent waiting for her to come home, finishing homework while his stomach growled. And in that same struggling neighborhood, he met his best friend, the one he believed would share every joy and sorrow with him. The 2 of them grew up in scarcity, both dreaming of breaking free from the cycle of poverty. One wanted to be a famous musician, the other dreamed of becoming a businessman who could change the game. And in their youth, they swore an oath: no matter what happens, we'll always stand by each other. It sounded like something straight out of a movie, but they believed it. Too naive to understand how easily people change when money enters the picture. Our main character, the man who would one day rise as a billionaire CEO, was different. He refused to accept poverty as destiny. Instead of crumbling under jeers of, "You'll never make it," he turned them into fuel. In class, while others laughed at his dreams of starting a business, he simply smiled and carefully scribbled down every idea into an old, torn notebook. A notebook that one day would become the weapon no one saw coming. But life, of course, isn't a fairy tale. And here at the very beginning you can already see the seed of betrayal being planted. His so-called best friend, the one who swore eternal loyalty, started to feel jealous, watching him think bigger, dream sharper. Outwardly he kept laughing, saying, "We'll get rich together." But deep down he was waiting for the moment to take it all. And tragedy, like a movie already written, was just waiting for its premiere. As time passed and both entered adulthood, things began to change. His best friend still clung to the dream of becoming a music star, wandering cheap bars with a worn-out guitar, while our main character poured every ounce of energy into studying and searching for business opportunities. He had nothing but a sharp mind and an unbreakable will. At first, they still met up often, talking about the bright future ahead. But soon, as you'll see, when one person starts moving faster, the other either keeps up or falls behind, and his best friend chose to fall behind. Instead of cheering him on, he began to mock. "Who do you think you are? A poor black kid like you can't do anything but dream." It sounded like a joke, but it cut deep. Our main character didn't fire back. He just smiled, a smile that was patient yet bitter. Deep down, he knew not everyone had the courage to dream big, and sometimes envy disguised itself as practical advice. Then one day, a turning point arrived. He was awarded a small scholarship to attend a business training program in a big city. To him, it was a golden ticket, a chance to escape the dead-end streets of his neighborhood. Excited, he shared the news with his best friend, hoping for congratulations, or at least a pat on the back. But instead, silence. His friend's face darkened, as if hiding something, just for a second, but that second etched itself into his memory. The look of jealousy. From that moment on, though he didn't want to believe it, he knew their childhood friendship would soon turn into a wound that might never heal, and the seed of betrayal had begun to sprout. The business training in the big city opened up a whole new world. Our main character found himself inside towering glass buildings where men in polished suits debated markets, investments, and numbers that sounded like magic. For a kid from a poor neighborhood, it was both overwhelming and irresistible. He scribbled notes, listened carefully, soaking in every drop of knowledge as if afraid to miss a single piece. It was there that his first real business idea took shape. A platform that would allow poor workers to access small investments to start their own ventures. Bold, human-centered, and most importantly, realistic. He shared it eagerly with his best friend during late-night calls, hoping for support and encouragement. but the reaction was far from what he expected. His friend scoffed, "You really think rich guys care about the poor? Stop dreaming." The words stung, but instead of crushing him, they fueled him. Deep inside, he knew that insults like these were often the greatest motivators. What he didn't know was that his friend wasn't just mocking him. He was taking notes, mentally recording every single detail. The ideas, the plans, even the rough sketches in his notebook. Instead of cheering him on, he was quietly calculating. A cold calculation hidden behind the mask of friendship. And dear listener, this is the moment where you almost want to scream, "Don't trust him. Don't say another word." But how could he know? He still believed in that naive promise of forever friends. And within that blind trust, he was unknowingly digging a pit for himself. One late evening, as the city lights glittered outside, he sat in his cramped dorm room flipping through his worn-out notebook filled with ideas. He called his best friend, voice brimming with excitement. "I think this could be the start. If we do it right, thousands of people could escape poverty. We could actually change the game." On the other end, there was a brief silence. Then came a laugh, a short, cold laugh. "Yeah, sure. Keep dreaming." To him, it was just another jab, another mocking remark. What he didn't realize was that in that moment his idea had ceased to be a secret. It had become the very dagger his friend would soon stab into his back. Weeks later, at a small seminar, he was stunned to hear someone presenting his exact idea. Every detail, every number, even the messy slogan from his notebook flashed across the big screen. And the presenter, none other than his so-called brother for life. In that moment, his heart shattered. He sat frozen, unable to believe his eyes. 15 years of friendship, those promises of forever, all reduced to nothing more than a stolen idea. And the worst part? The entire audience was clapping, cheering for the traitor. His fists clenched, veins bulging, but no words came out. Only one sentence echoed in his mind. "So this is how a friend can kill a dream." The screen fades to black. And dear viewers, this is only the beginning. What happens next? How he rises from this betrayal to take back everything and more will keep you shocked, angry, and ultimately deeply satisfied. After the betrayal, he felt like he had fallen off a cliff. The days that followed were a blur of anger, bitterness, and helplessness. Every time he replayed the scene of that seminar, the room filled with applause for the traitor. His chest tightened like someone was crushing his heart. The only question echoing in his mind, why him? Why the one I trusted the most? There were nights he couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, haunted by mocking words and jealous stares. At times he wanted to quit. After all, if even your best friend can turn on you, who in this world is left to trust? But in his darkest moments, he remembered his mother, the woman who wiped sweat from her brow after late-night shifts, the one who told him, "You can't choose where you're born, but you can choose how you rise." That memory kept him alive. Instead of breaking, he started watching. He quietly observed how his so-called friend used his stolen idea, how he stood on stage bragging as if it was all his own. And then a realization hit him. Ideas can be stolen, but vision and resilience, those can't be taken away. And dear viewers, that was the first spark, the moment he began turning pain into fuel. He stopped crying, stopped asking why. Instead, he began sketching out another plan, bolder, riskier, one that the betrayer could never even imagine. He started with small steps. Instead of charging head-on, he chose to watch the market, to listen to what people truly needed. While the traitor was busy flaunting his stolen idea in glossy magazines and sipping cocktails at fancy events, our main character quietly walked the streets of poor neighborhoods, talking to laborers, single mothers, unemployed fathers. He took meticulous notes, what they needed, what they lacked, what they dreamed of, and from those seemingly small conversations, he spotted a fatal flaw in the betrayer's model. The guy had an idea, but no understanding of people. He built a flashy product to impress investors, but it had no soul. Picture this, dear viewers. On one side, the ex-best friend in a sharp suit, raising a glass of red wine, talking dramatically about the future of financial equality, while the very poor people he promised to help didn't even know he existed. Ridiculous, isn't it? Our main character was different. He knew that to succeed, he had to start with the people themselves. And that sincerity made others trust him, opening up about struggles they had never told anyone. In a rundown cafe, He flipped through a brand new notebook, filling page after page with plans. This wasn't just about responding to betrayal. This was a declaration of war. One day, he swore, he would stand on that stage, not to brag, but to prove that real strength and resilience will always crush fake betrayal. During his walks through poor neighborhoods, he wasn't just collecting data. He was meeting people, his very first allies. A single mother of 3, juggling bills but still smiling with hope. A cab driver who lost everything in the financial crash yet still believed that tomorrow will be better, and a young student working 3 jobs to pay tuition but refusing to let go of the dream of starting her own company. These people didn't have money, but they had faith, and they saw in him not just a young man with an idea, but someone who truly listened, someone who valued their everyday stories more than the spotlight of any stage. Meanwhile, the betrayer was starting to inflate. He appeared in magazines with a perfect grin, spouting slogans that sounded impressive but rang hollow. Investors cheered at first, but within months whispers began, "Wait, who's actually using this product?" Here's the ironic part. He had money for a fancy office, but no real customers. Our main character had no office, just a rundown cafe and a notebook full of scribbles, but he had the trust of real people, with real struggles. And dear viewers, that's the difference between a fake CEO in a suit and someone planting the seeds of a future empire. From these humble allies, a bigger plan was quietly taking shape, a plan that would soon make the betrayer break into a cold sweat. As time passed, the scattered notes and stories evolved into a full-fledged plan. He began drafting a business model, simple yet solid, focused on the very things the betrayer ignored: real life, real people. One evening, in the same rundown cafe, he opened his battered laptop and tested his idea with his first allies. No stage lights, no fancy wine glasses, just tired, working-class people whose eyes lit up when they saw a spark of hope in his model. Meanwhile, across town, the betrayer hosted a grand press conference. He stood tall at the podium, grinning wide, promising to revolutionize financial futures for the poor. But then, a major investor suddenly asked, "How many real people are actually using your product?" The room went silent. His smile faltered. And in that split second, he realized that glamour has an expiration date, but truth doesn't. Dear viewers, this was the turning point. On one side, cracks were starting to show under the scrutiny of investors. On the other, a quiet, steady foundation was being built for a true empire, and soon, it was only a matter of time before the scales tipped. The screen fades out, leaving a haunting question. When the truth is exposed, who will still be standing? The betrayer or the resilient dreamer? Rumors began to spread. Investors whispered that the betrayer's flashy project lacked substance. People murmured, "Sounds nice, but who has actually been helped by it?" From the glittering parties, he started noticing doubtful stares, limp handshakes, forced smiles. Meanwhile, our main character kept moving quietly forward. Each week, more people joined his model. Not many, but real. A single mother received her first small loan to open a corner shop. An unemployed old man finally bought second-hand tools to fix cars again. These small victories spread like fire, igniting hope in the community. Then came an unexpected twist. A young reporter stumbled upon the story of one of his early clients. Curious, she tracked him down at the cafe where he worked. At first, he refused an interview, thinking it was too early to go public.
But the sincerity in her eyes made him change his mind. The article appeared the following week.
No clickbait headline, just "A small idea is changing lives in a poor neighborhood." But its simplicity was what made it spread like wildfire. People shared it, commented on it, and most importantly, investors began to take notice. The betrayer was furious, slamming his coffee cup to the ground when he saw the article. He roared, "This can't be happening. That idea is mine." But dear viewers, we all know the truth. Ideas can be stolen, but the heart and soul behind them cannot. And that truth marked the beginning of a battle that would be anything but merciful. After the article went viral, the betrayer nearly lost his mind. He couldn't stand being overshadowed by the very man he once mocked. So he struck back. First came the whisper campaigns, secret phone calls to journalists. "Watch out, that project is a scam. The guy behind it has nothing but empty promises." Then came anonymous posts on forums, labeling him a delusional dreamer. claiming he was using the poor to boost his own image. Irony at its finest, right? The thief calling the true owner a fraud. But that's life, sometimes bitter, often absurd. He even tried bribing a few of the people our main character had helped, promising them money if they spoke against him. A couple of weak souls agreed. But then came the twist. The majority of those poor families refused outright. No, he's the only one who ever listened to us. We won't sell him out for a few dirty dollars. That was a slap in the face for the betrayer. He had money, connections, media tricks, but our protagonist had something untouchable, genuine trust from real people. Still, the smear campaign left scars. Some investors hesitated. Meetings were scheduled, then canceled at the last minute. Pressure mounted, like an invisible storm slowly swallowing him. And right in the middle of that chaos, he received an unexpected call from a powerful figure, someone so influential that even the betrayer bowed his head to him. A call that could change everything. The phone buzzed, and on the screen appeared a name he never dreamed would call him. Richard Coleman, a legendary investor, the kind of man whose single nod could turn a no-name startup into a billion-dollar unicorn. They called him the King of Wall Street without a crown. You're the young man from last week's article, aren't you? Richard's voice was deep, sharp, more of a test than a question. He froze for a second, then steadied himself. Yes, that's me. And I believe my idea won't just live on paper. It will change the real lives of real people. Richard chuckled softly. Not mockery, interest. You know, I've heard all sorts of rumors about you this week. A fraud. A dreamer, but I like dreamers who know how to make their dreams real. So I want to meet you, in person. Dear viewers, this is the moment we've been waiting for. Our main character finally catching the eye of a giant. But don't celebrate yet, because if Richard Coleman is the Golden Mountain, climbing it will require trials harsher than any betrayal he's faced so far. Meanwhile, the betrayer caught wind of the news. His face went pale as he hissed in his office, "This can't be happening! Why would he notice him?" And then he stormed out, ready to set up yet another roadblock. And so, dear viewers, this chapter closes. But you and I both know the real storm has only just begun. On the day of the meeting with Richard Coleman, he prepared more carefully than ever. His old suit pressed crisp, his battered notebook tucked in his pocket like a lucky charm. His heart pounded, but his eyes blazed. He knew this might be the only chance to change his life forever. Richard entered the boardroom like a king without a crown. He didn't need words. His sharp gaze alone weighed down the air. Flipping through a few pages of documents, he suddenly looked up and asked bluntly, "What do you have that no one else does?" Silence filled the room. He swallowed hard, then answered firmly, "People. Real people with real stories. I'm not selling flashy dreams. I'm building solutions for those who've been forgotten." Richard studied him for a long moment, eyes piercing. Then he nodded, just slightly, but that tiny nod was enough to make his heart explode with hope. And then, the door burst open. Striding in was none other than the betrayer himself. Dressed in a sharp suit, wearing that fake grin, he declared, "Apologies for being late, but I believe I'm the one Mr. Coleman truly wants to meet." Dear viewers, everything went dark. The entire game flipped in an instant. Who would Richard choose? The cunning traitor or the resilient dreamer with a true vision? The answer lies in the next chapter. The tension in the boardroom was so thick you could hear a pin drop. Richard Coleman sat at the head, eyes darting between two men, one with a fake grin, the other with unwavering resolve. The betrayer stepped forward, his voice booming as if the room were his stage. "Mr. Coleman, I'm the one who created this entire idea. The plan, the details, everything came from me. I have the team, I have the capital, and I have the experience to make this real." His words flowed smoothly, polished, like he had rehearsed them 100 times in the mirror. To an outsider, it was convincing. But, dear viewers, you and I both know, it was nothing more than cheap theater. Our main character sat there, gripping his old notebook so tightly his knuckles turned white. Memories flooded in, sleepless nights drafting plans, conversations with the poor, their tears, their smiles. He knew that if he stayed silent, everything would be lost. Then he stood. No theatrics, no drama, just a steady, firm voice. "Mr. Coleman, I don't have a flashy team. I don't have media tricks, but I do have proof." He opened the notebook, revealing page after page. Names, addresses, stories of people whose lives had already changed. Photos, testimonials, even tiny receipts showing the difference it made. The room fell silent. Richard leaned forward, eyes sharp as blades. "Is this real? Can it be verified?" He nodded firmly. And in that moment, for the first time, the betrayer's confident smile began to crack. Richard closed the notebook, his eyes glinting with the sharpness of a man who had seen hundreds, thousands of entrepreneurs walk in and fail. He leaned back in his chair, speaking slowly. "Ideas are cheap. Anyone can talk. But I don't invest in pretty words. I invest in truth." The room froze in silence. Then Richard delivered an unexpected proposal. "Tomorrow, both of you will come with me to one of the poorest neighborhoods. There I want to see your work with my own eyes. One of you claims to have a team, the other claims to have real people. I'll look, I'll ask, and only one of you will get the chance." The betrayer's face paled, but he quickly forced a smile. "Of course. Mr. Coleman, I'd be delighted." Yet his clenched fist, veins bulging, betrayed his panic. Our main character felt something different, a strange fire rising within. This was the moment he had been waiting for. No more pointless arguments, no more staged performances. Only the truth. And he knew the truth was on his side. Richard stood, ending the meeting with a sharp line. "Prepare yourselves. Tomorrow we'll see who's real, and who's just a shadow." Dear viewers, that was the moment the game officially began. And tomorrow would decide more than just an investment. It would decide the fate of two men, one who thrived on lies, and one who dared to turn pain into power. The next day, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, as if even the weather sensed the coming clash. Richard Coleman sat in his luxury car with the two candidates silent in the back, each lost in thought. The betrayer wore an expensive suit, fussing with his tie, as if polish alone could save him. Our protagonist sat quietly, gripping his old notebook, not anxious, eager. For the first time, the scales would be weighed on the side of truth. The car stopped in a rundown neighborhood. Pothole-ridden streets, crooked houses, kids playing with makeshift toys. Richard stepped out, glanced around, then turned to both men. "This is where you claim change will happen. Show me!" The betrayer cleared his throat and launched into a speech. He pointed at glossy posters, talking about vision, strategy, disruptive technology. The locals stared at him like he was speaking an alien language. A few even snickered, "What's he even saying? We don't get a word of it." Then came our protagonist's turn. No PowerPoint, no flashy posters. He simply called over a woman, the single mother he had helped open a small shop. With trembling hands, she held up a receipt, voice breaking. "Because of this loan, I can raise my 3 kids without begging anyone for help." The crowd stirred. An old man stepped forward, holding up a rusty wrench. "Thanks to him, I can fix cars again. I can earn my living with my own hands." Richard stayed silent, watching. No more hollow numbers. This was living truth, proof in flesh and blood. And in that moment, the betrayer's confident grin collapsed into visible panic. Dear viewers, do you feel that satisfaction? This was only the warm-up. Richard's final decision hasn't been spoken yet, but clearly, the scales are shifting. The crowd grew larger, their testimonies pounding like hammers against the wall of lies built by the betrayer. Richard folded his arms, his sharp eyes fixed, like a judge waiting for the final moment before delivering a verdict. The betrayer flailed. He pulled out his phone, flashing charts, data, even pictures of sample clients everyone could tell were staged. His voice grew louder, but the louder it got, the more hollow it sounded, like a man sinking in a storm. Our protagonist didn't need more words. The real people, their real stories, spoke for him. Every grateful look, every tear shed, was louder than any statistic could ever be. Richard raised his hand for silence. The noise died instantly, leaving only the sound of wind whispering through narrow streets. He walked slowly toward the two men, stopping right between them. The whole neighborhood held its breath. "I've seen enough," Richard said, his voice echoing, final yet unfinished, like the opening of a verdict. He turned to our protagonist, eyes drilling straight into his soul. Then he turned to the betrayer, trembling beneath his expensive suit. "Dear viewers," Richard was about to deliver his decision, a decision that could crown one man and crush the other. And just as his lips parted, the screen cut to black. The answer awaits in the next chapter. "I've seen enough," Richard repeated, his voice echoing through the narrow streets. The crowd froze, every eye locked on him. Then he turned to the betrayer, speaking slowly. You have numbers, you have glamour, but what you don't have is the soul of this idea, the crowd murmured. The betrayer forced a smile, but it cracked, trembling like a broken mask. Richard then faced our protagonist, his gaze sharp yet warmer than before. And you may not have a big team or massive funding, but you have something money can't buy, real trust from real people, and that is what creates lasting value. He paused for a heartbeat, then delivered the words that set the entire street on fire. I will invest in you! Cheers erupted. The poor embraced him, tears streaming down their faces. This wasn't just his victory, it was theirs too, a triumph for all who had been forgotten. But dear viewers, if you think the story ends in glory, you're mistaken. The betrayer wasn't done. In his bloodshot eyes, a fire of hatred raged. He clenched his fists, muttering through gritted teeth, Fine. If I can't have it, then he'll never keep it. And in that very moment, another storm was born. The victory spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, Richard Coleman invests in project to help the poor. Photos of him shaking hands with struggling families lit up the front pages, while he was overwhelmed with joy, already planning expansion somewhere in the shadows. The betrayer plotted his revenge. The fake grin was gone, replaced by the cold glare of a cornered predator. Steal my spotlight? He growled in his office, slamming his glass to the floor. Fine, I'll snuff it out. For good. The schemes began. He hired trolls to flood social media with lies, claims that the project was a sham, that Richard Coleman had been duped. He whispered deals to local politicians, promising kickbacks if they blocked permits for the project. And the final blow, he hired a law firm to sue our protagonist for stealing his idea. Ironic, isn't it, dear viewers? The thief accusing the victim. But in a world of tricks and power plays, even the truth can struggle to be heard. The lawsuit shook confidence. Some investors backed out immediately. Pressure crashed down like a storm. He sat in his small room, head in hands, wondering, did I win? Or did I just step onto a harsher battlefield? Meanwhile, the betrayer smiled cruelly, whispering, let's see how long you can stand. On the first day of trial, reporters swarmed the courthouse, cameras flashing non-stop. At the plaintiff's table, the betrayer wore a gleaming suit, his smug smile restored. He even clutched the hand of a celebrity lawyer, posing as if victory was already his. Our protagonist was different. His suit was still the old one, but his steps were steady. In his hands wasn't a mountain of legal jargon. It was a thin folder, filled with the real stories of people his project had helped. The betrayer rose first, his voice booming. Your Honor, this idea was mine. The defendant exploited our relationship, stole my plan, and now shamelessly profits from it. The courtroom buzzed. Some journalists nodded, swayed by his polished words. But then came our protagonist's turn. He didn't speak much. Instead, he called his witnesses. A single mother stepped up, holding receipts and the keys to her tiny shop. Her voice trembled. If he's a thief, then tell me, who gave me this chance? Who came to our neighborhood every day, listening to us? An old man with a cane followed. Anyone can claim to have an idea, but working it, sweating for it, that was only him. The courtroom fell silent. Cameras kept flashing, but now they were aimed elsewhere. Not at the betrayer. He sat there, face burning red, eyes flickering with unease. From the audience, Richard Coleman smiled faintly. He knew the game was beginning to turn. The trial went on, with witness after witness stepping forward, their stories slicing through the betrayer's facade like sharp blades. The atmosphere in the courtroom tilted heavily in our protagonist's favor. Even the judge nodded, scribbling notes. The betrayer grew restless, whispering frantically to his lawyer, sweat beading on his forehead. Yet under the media's cameras he forced a smile, a stiff, unnatural smile. Just when it seemed justice was about to fall, the betrayer's lawyer suddenly shot up, booming, Your Honor, we have new evidence. The courtroom erupted. The lawyer held up a thick folder, claiming it was proof that the protagonist once signed an agreement with his best friend, one stating that all ideas belonged to them together. The judge frowned, taking the file. Silence blanketed the room. Our protagonist sat frozen, unable to believe his eyes. It was the very paper they scribbled on years ago, when two naive boys swore they would get rich together. The betrayer smirked, his cruel grin finally returning. You may have their trust, but paper and ink? Don't lie. Dear viewers, This is where the chapter ends. Will that old piece of paper become the dagger that kills his dream, or is it only the setup for a spectacular comeback? The courtroom fell silent, broken only by the dry rustle of papers as the judge examined the file. In the gallery, journalists whispered, cameras flashed endlessly. The tension was thick enough to snap. He sat frozen. The paper was real, scribbled years ago by him and his friend in a dingy room when they naively wrote, "We'll get rich together," and signed it like kids. He never imagined it would one day be twisted into evidence against him. The betrayer's lawyer pressed on. Clearly, the defendant agreed to share all ideas. Therefore, every plan he pursues now belongs to both, not him alone. The betrayer smirked, eyes gleaming with triumph. This time, you're finished. But life, dear viewers, has its own sense of irony. Suddenly, Richard Coleman rose from the gallery, his voice calm yet thunderous. "Your Honor, may I speak?" The room turned, stunned into silence. Richard walked forward, picked up the paper, glanced at it, then smirked. "This isn't a contract. It's a childish promise with no legal weight whatsoever. I've invested in countless companies. I know the difference between a binding document and scribbles. Don't insult the court with playground notes dressed as evidence." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The betrayer's face drained of color, his secret weapon shattered with a single blow. Our protagonist inhaled deeply. From the edge of despair, a light flickered before him. And dear viewers, believe me, the real comeback has only just begun. The courtroom shifted from tense silence to murmuring chaos. Whispers rippled. "That paper has no value." Did he really think the court would fall for scribbles? The betrayer snatched the paper back, face blazing red, shouting, "This is evidence! This is the truth!" But no one believed him now. Some reporters even zoomed in on the sheet, then chuckled, "Look at that, coffee stains all over it. Looks like a high school kid's homework." Richard motioned for our protagonist to stand. His voice was calm but commanding. "Show them your truth." He stepped forward, not with fiery arguments, but with sincerity. He presented his records, how many received small loans, how many families had escaped hunger. Then he called a new witness, a young student standing nervously but with burning eyes. "He believed in me when no one else did. If he's a thief, then tell me, who will give me that faith back?" The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge banged his gavel for order, but it was clear. The scales had tipped. The betrayer slumped in his chair, sweat dripping. Gone was the mask of confidence. In his panicked eyes shone something new, the fear of losing to the truth. Dear viewers, this was only the first counterattack. In the chapters ahead, you'll see how truth not only saves him, but begins to dismantle the betrayer's entire facade. After the moving testimonies, the trial seemed all but decided. But the betrayer's lawyer refused to yield. He rose, voice dripping with disdain. "These stories, touching, yes, but how do we know they're not staged? How do we know this isn't a publicity stunt?" The room buzzed again. A few reporters nodded, eager for a new angle. The betrayer's cruel grin returned, as if he'd just found a lifeline. But Richard merely folded his arms, smirking. Then he pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Your Honor, before this trial, I sent my own audit team to investigate. Here are the verified financial records, receipts, and transaction logs from his project. Every single piece matches the witnesses' testimonies. Not one number is false." The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed. The judge frowned deeply, eyes narrowing at the plaintiff's side. Our protagonist lifted his head, eyes blazing. But Richard wasn't finished. He turned to the betrayer. "And as for you, we checked your so-called project too, and here, your clients are nothing more than hired actors." He laid out evidence, backstage photos, email exchanges, even payment slips for the amateur actors. Chaos exploded. Shouts rang out, "Fraud! Liar!" The betrayer froze, face drained white. He lunged for the folder, but Richard's lawyer slammed it down first. His empire of lies was collapsing before everyone's eyes. Dear viewers, satisfying, isn't it? But don't forget, this isn't the end. A man who can betray his best friend will stop at nothing, even if it means dragging them both down into the fire. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed, whispers surged. The judge's gavel banged again and again to no effect. The betrayer stood frozen, sweat pouring down, his eyes wild with panic and desperation. Just when everyone thought he was finished, he suddenly sprang up, voice shrill. "You think he's a hero? No, he's no different from me. Look, I have emails, messages. He shared ideas with me.
If I'm a thief, then he's an accomplice.
He slammed a stack of hastily printed papers onto the table. Old emails from when the two were young, scribbling dreams and half-baked schemes. The wording was vague, easy to twist. The room stirred again. Some reporters exchanged looks, already drafting scandalous headlines. Billion-dollar CEO under suspicion of collusion? Our protagonists stood still. Memories flooded back, late nights dreaming together, naive plans shared in trust. And now that very trust had become a weapon against him. Richard Coleman frowned, fingers tapping on the desk. He glanced at the papers, then at him, before smirking coldly. He's just trying to drag you into the mud with him. But dear viewers, the judge had not ruled yet. The trial was no longer just legal, it had become a life-or-death game. Truth versus lies pushed to the edge, and then, with tension stretched to the breaking point, the judge declared, "This court is adjourned. We will resume next week to examine the new evidence." The screen faded to black. The audience held their breath. Would those naive memories become the dagger that turned against him? Or would they ignite a comeback of legendary proportions? In the week leading up to the next hearing, the city buzzed with speculation. Headlines screamed, "Young CEO suspected of collusion in idea theft. Who really owns the billion-dollar project?" Talk shows invited experts, lawyers, even self-proclaimed witnesses to argue. Everyone had an opinion, most preferring drama over truth. He read those articles, torn between anger and exhaustion. But instead of collapsing, he chose to fight. He knew that if he didn't turn this week into an opportunity, the next trial could bury everything he had built. Richard Coleman summoned him to his glass-walled office overlooking the city lights. He didn't say much, just slid a thick folder across the table. "This is your task for the week. Dig into your past. Find every piece of proof showing you were the true mind behind this idea. We won't just defend, we'll attack." He nodded, eyes blazing. That night he returned to his small room, tearing through old boxes and notebooks from his youth. Scribbles, crude sketches, clumsy numbers, they brought back a flood of memories. And buried among them he stumbled upon something. An old journal, each entry dated, detailing his ideas, signed only by him. Dear viewers, do you feel that chill? A small clue, yes, but one that could strike like a dagger. Because truth doesn't need a shout. Placed in the right moment, it can turn the entire game. While he pored over his old journals, reigniting hope, on the other side of the city the betrayer was working too. But his work wasn't finding truth. It was manufacturing more lies. In a sleek office, he sat surrounded by lawyers, PR consultants, and spin doctors. His voice was cold, sharp. "I don't care what evidence he has. Your job is to make the public believe I was the pioneer. If you can't find proof, then create it." One lawyer hesitated. "You realize, sir, that could be illegal." He slammed the table, cutting him off. "Shut up. I don't need a lecture on ethics. I need victory. And I have enough money to buy it." Dear viewers, do you see the contrast? One side digging through real memories, real sweat. The other side printing lies with cash. And yet, lies funded by money can spread doubt frighteningly fast. Within days, newspapers began publishing new evidence. Blurry photos, documents with shady origins, even anonymous witnesses claiming the original idea was entirely his. Public opinion wavered once more, trust in our protagonist shaken. In his small room, reading the headlines, he pressed his lips tight. But this time, instead of panic, he let out a cold smile. "Fine. If he wants to fight with lies, I'll end him with the truth." That night, in his small room, he spread out all the papers, the old journal, and the evidence he'd gathered across the table. The dim lamp made each page glow like puzzle pieces forming a greater picture. He flipped through the journal. The very first ideas, the clumsy sketches, the rough numbers. But all bore one undeniable mark, his signature, his dates, long before the betrayer ever entered the story. He knew the journal alone wasn't enough, so he reached for the phone, calling his true allies, the single mother, the old mechanic, the young student. His voice was calm, but resolute. "Next week I need you to stand with me. Not for me, but for all of us. If he wins, everything we've built gets buried. But if we win, no one will ever steal this truth again." On the other end, their replies came steady, strong. "We'll be there." Dear viewers, do you feel it? This was no longer just a trial. This had become a battle for justice, where ordinary people, armed with truth and trust, would face off against money and lies. He slipped the journal into his bag, clenching his fists. In his blazing eyes now wasn't just the hunger for victory. It was a promise. The truth would be revealed, and it would crush the betrayer under the light of justice. The night before the trial, the city seemed to hold its breath. Outside, skyscraper lights still burned, but in his small room, only the scratch of pen on paper and the pounding of his heart filled the air. He sat at his desk, reviewing every piece of evidence: the old journal, witness testimonies, receipts, financial records verified by Richard. He arranged them neatly, building a fortress of truth to withstand any attack. In the mirror, his face was gaunt from sleepless nights, but in his eyes, dear viewers, was a light that made people shiver, the light of a man who refuses to back down. Meanwhile, the betrayer stayed awake too, but his scene was different. Spilled wine across the table, piles of hastily printed documents, and a man staring into the mirror with bloodshot eyes. His whisper was hoarse, chilling. "Tomorrow, I will not lose, never. 2 men, 2 worlds. One armed with truth, the other hiding behind lies. And tomorrow, in that courtroom, they would collide with the force of an earthquake." Dear viewers, Chapter 7 closes here. But remember, tomorrow will decide more than a verdict. It will decide who writes the next chapter of a billion-dollar empire, the resilient dreamer or the betrayer. That morning the courtroom was packed. Journalists, investors, and even the poor families he had once helped, all were there. The air was thick, every breath waiting for an explosion. He entered with the old journal in his hand. His suit was simple, but his stride was steady, stronger than ever. Each step carried the weight of all those who believed in him. Behind him, Richard Coleman followed quietly, his eyes sharp like a battle-hardened warrior. The betrayer arrived too, a stark contrast. Expensive suit, perfect tie, fake smile stretched across a face lined with sleepless nights. His eyes darted around the room, clinging to the hope that his fabricated evidence might still save him. The judge's gavel slammed, voice stern. "Today, we settle the truth. No more rumors, no more hearsay, only evidence and justice." Silence fell. The world seemed to hold its breath. He rose first, opening the old journal, turning page after page. Scribbles appeared, dated clearly, proof that he had nurtured the idea long before the betrayer forced his way in. His voice was calm but firm. "This is not just paper. This is the witness of time, and time cannot be bought." Applause burst from the poor in the gallery. The betrayer scowled, clutching his stack of fake documents. Dear viewers, the final trial had begun. And in the next part, you'll witness truth clashing head-on with lies, a battle where neither side can retreat. As soon as he finished presenting, the courtroom erupted with applause and murmurs. But the betrayer wasn't about to bow out. He leapt up, slamming a thick folder onto the table like his final trump card. "Your Honor," he shouted. "The journal may be real, but these emails prove he shared the idea with me. Without me, this project would never exist." His lawyer rushed forward, handing out printed emails filled with vague, clumsily spliced conversations. Whispers spread through the room, doubt seeping back in. Our protagonist stared at the stack of forgeries, lips pressed tight. But before he could speak, Richard Coleman shot to his feet, his voice booming, "Your Honor, we've had these emails thoroughly examined, and here are the forensic reports. Every single one is doctored. Metadata clearly shows they were created only weeks ago." He handed over the report, pages stamped boldly with the word "fake." The courtroom exploded. Photographers snapped furiously, capturing the moment history was made. The betrayer exposed in open court. The betrayer's face drained of color, his mouth gaping like a fish on dry land. His voice cracked. No, this can't be." Dear viewers, the walls of lies are crumbling. But is this the final blow, or does the betrayer still have one desperate move left? Brace yourselves. The next part will decide it all. The courtroom descended into chaos as the fake emails were exposed. Shouts rang out. "Fraud! Disgrace to justice! Selling your soul just to win!" The betrayer slumped in his chair, pale, then suddenly sprang up, screaming in desperation. "No, you don't understand. I was the first to have this idea. Without me, he's nothing." His cries echoed, but were drowned out by murmurs of disgust. Even his lawyer hung his head in shame, unable to defend him any longer. Our protagonist rose, stepping to the podium, his voice calm but heavy with truth. "You can say whatever you want, but the truth doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people whose lives have been changed, whose futures have been saved. And they are right here?" He turned. Dozens stood, the single mother, the old mechanic, the young student. Together they rose, not with words, but with their very presence, living proof no court could deny. The judge's gavel slammed, his voice stern yet touched with emotion. "This court has heard enough. A verdict will be delivered after deliberation. Dear viewers, the tension is suffocating. On one side, truth, trust, resilience. On the other, lies, crumbling to dust. And in just moments, justice will tip the scales once and for all." The courtroom fell into heavy silence as the judge returned after deliberation. All eyes were fixed on the gavel in his hand. His voice rang out, slow, deliberate, firm. After reviewing all evidence, testimonies, and forensic reports, the court rules. The defendant is not guilty of stealing the idea. The room erupted. Cheers, applause, tears, all collided in a roar of relief. The poor embraced him, sobbing with joy. From the back, Richard Coleman simply smiled, nodding slightly as if he had foreseen this all along. The judge's voice grew harsher. "On the contrary, the plaintiff has submitted falsified evidence, defaming the defendant. Therefore, the plaintiff is found guilty of deceiving this court and will face appropriate penalties." The betrayer froze. He stammered protests, but officers moved in, gripping his shoulders. His eyes burned with hatred as he spat. "This isn't over. I'll be back. But the heavy slam of the cell door silenced him forever. Our protagonist stood in the courtroom, exhaling as though shedding a mountain of weight. In his eyes was not only the joy of victory, but also a profound peace. He had defended the truth, and more importantly, the faith of those who had trusted him. Dear viewers, the story closes here. From the agony of betrayal, he transformed pain into power, building a billion-dollar empire not only with wealth, but with trust, truth, and an unbreakable spirit. And that, truly, was his greatest victory.